Welcome to explainingthefuture.com. This time I'm going to talk about global catastrophes. As I record this video, the world is in the grip of the credit crunch and facing a probable flu pandemic. It's therefore an appropriate moment to consider how humanity may best cope with and learn from such highly predictable global events. The credit crunch will cost the world economy over $4 trillion. Humanity should therefore be seeking at least a little species wisdom in return. Most importantly, the credit crunch needs to be the end of individually focused short-term economics. And whether or not it develops into a pandemic, swine flu should also reinforce the message that putting company profits first, individual freedoms second, and the welfare of the majority third is not a way to run a planet. Our current order of priorities needs to be reversed. If this were the case today, we'd be taking a looming pandemic far more seriously and constraining non-essential travel and public gatherings. And if our politicians had regulated the financial markets to put the welfare of the majority ahead of individual freedoms and stock market excess, the credit crunch would never have happened. Alongside the credit crunch and a present or future pandemic, within the next decade we will also have to deal with an oil crash and the growing impact of climate change. We are either fast approaching or already beyond the point at which there's less oil left in the ground than we've taken out. Beyond this peak oil pinnacle, production will gradually decrease at a few % per year. The result will not be a world without oil, but rather significant price increases that could cripple food production, personal travel, manufacturing and transportation. In parallel, climate change will stop us living or producing food in currently habitable and fertile regions. Right now, an oil crash and climate change may seem like things we can ignore. However, we're in the mess we are today due to decades spent ignoring the inevitable and focusing only on the short term. The human race needs to accept that the survival of civilization is in no way guaranteed unless we start taking a bit more care of ourselves. For 50 golden years we may have been lucky and never had it so good. However, sleepwalking into disaster has to stop before it's too late. The time has come to embrace collective responsibility and to stop obsessing about short-term individualism. We can do this with more local living, gaining more respect for nature, and placing more women in authority. More local living does not imply that we should never travel abroad or stop all global trade. However, it does mean that we need to start treating travel and non-local consumption as a privilege rather than a right. Gaining more respect for nature does not involve an end to industrialization, but rather recognizing that we ignore complex natural processes at our peril. In particular, weather systems and viruses were around long before humanity and are at least as powerful as ourselves. Placing more women in authority would reduce our focus on the over-competitive, short-term decision-making that has crippled our economies and cursed the next generation with debt. Granted, the competition at which males so excel may be vital for our survival. However, so too is the focus on nurture and social cohesion characteristic of the female behaviour of most species. Ask people right now what is most threatened by a flu pandemic, and whilst most men say the economy, most women first mention their children. That more women should be making more key decisions really ought to be obvious. All of us this week who watched the World Health Organization announce an imminent flu pandemic will never forget how the planet listened and stood and trembled as one. Right now, the future may be bleak. However, there's also the possibility that global catastrophes, present and future, could trigger a new, more sustainable world order. In other words, if we begin to think and act differently soon enough, the worst of times may be the beginning of a new best of times. In the face of calamity, the future indeed rests in all of our hands.